Hi, folks. Welcome to Sunday's edition of the I Write Radio podcast, videocast. There's an awful lot happened this morning, very quickly.
It didn't I?
Sophie Ridge's interview with Nicola, we're going to touch on that. The power of North England local politicians is being exerted. Whether it will actually have any influence, we maybe have a chat about that. There's a new poll out, which you're not too happy with, Stuart.
No, nothing right about it.
And Craig Murray
yes,
posted an interesting blog today. Will we start with Craig Murray?
Yes, because what he's suggesting is it has global consequences for Twitter. Our Lord Advocate, Craig Murray says, our Lord Advocate has threatened Craig Murray in the process of this prosecution for contempt of court by saying that, okay, so it's not anything that Craig Murray has actually posted on Twitter that is in contempt of court, but a comment by somebody that commented on what Craig Murray said in court. Now that has huge ramifications. The Lord Advocate claims that the rules on Twitter changed in November last year, which isn't very long ago when it comes to court cases, does it, when you think about it? And that if you have, it is possible, I've never noticed this, it's possible for you to stop people commenting on your Twitter account, or stop other people seeing what they, stop the world seeing what other people comment on your Twitter messages.
Well, I'm not even sure the Lord Advocate's got that right, because I think what that button does is stop the reply popping up on your timeline.
Not the public timeline.
So it pops up on the person's timeline as a reply to you, but you have no way of stopping it doing that. And what the Lord Advocate is essentially saying is you are acting as the publisher
we're back on this,
of your timeline.
We're back on this total global horn of a dilemma for all the Facebook and Twitter in particular, but all the social media accounts, that they're either a publisher or you're just a social media. Now, if you're a publisher, you're responsible for what is seen on your site. Or if they're passing it on to the person who runs me, you, or anybody that's got a social media account, we're responsible for everything that appears below our bloody name.
That's the other huge question. If Craig Murray were to be found guilty of contempt on the basis of a reply to his Twitter account, that then presumes that everybody on Twitter is a publisher. And opens up a huge can of worms, as you say. But it also means that it can be argued that anybody that does anything on Facebook is, as an individual, a publisher, not just Facebook.
Not just Facebook. I'm glad you made that point. It just occurred to me as well.
So we then would have numerous court cases. I would imagine that Craig Murray's appeal will be to claim that he isn't a publisher, and tiny wee Scotland out of the whole world might be the place that forces Facebook, Twitter, etc. to take responsibility for what gets published on their sites.
I'll be honest with you, Tory. Given the unlimited power that Facebook now has, it seems highly unlikely.
It does, but if Scotland were to be the only place in the world where it was each individual that posted on social media was publishing, what happens to social media in Scotland? Indeed, what happens when somebody from America answers something on your Twitter? Can they ever come to Scotland? Or for fear of being jailed, would they have to stay away?
What if somebody in America posts on my Twitter account or my Facebook account a list of the alphabet women?
Yep. that's bringing it right back to Craig Murray's situation. So you are expected to sit on your timeline,
waiting in case somebody does it.
and you better be quick, because if somebody sees it before you and takes a screenshot,
Yep.
you're heading for the High Court, son.
Yeah, well, no problem there. I can cope.
So huge can of worms. It actually looks like the what do they call him again? The advocate,
Lord Advocate.
Lord Advocate.
He is the man himself that's in trouble, and he's
Well,
flailing like this. He's the man that's going down eventually, if
it
truth be
looks
told.
desperate.
It's desperate. It's no, he's the one that's going down, not everybody else.
I'd be
Using his power
interested.
at the moment.
I'd be interested to know if they've at any point offered Craig Murray a way out. If basically they've said, "Oh, if you publish an apology, blah blah blah, we'll let you off." I don't know. I can't see Craig not having told us that if it had happened.
I would love to interview Craig. I'd love to interview Craig. Do you know what? I mean, I think I said earlier on, bear in mind how important his attendance at the recent Assange trial has been on a world scale again, on a global scale as far as journalists are concerned. Again, it's to do with publisher versus social media.
Well,
Like Julian Assange has always said he's never enticed people to give him information that was illegal. And they, when you think all the people that are not being prosecuted, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian.
but is this also a way of avoiding having to prosecute any of the mainstream media journalists by tying it to Twitter?
It's massive global intimidation of whistleblowing people and of journalists, investigative journalists. That's what it is.
Well, I don't think that's the case in the Scottish case, but I wonder if by trying to use Twitter, it's the way they're going to avoid having to go after Danny Garavelli.
Well, look, here's a question for you, Tory. Is there no link between the danger that Craig Murray represents to, shall we say, what they call the Five Eyes? You know who I mean by the Five Eyes, the security services of the English-speaking world? Is there no link between that and what's happening with the prosecution in Scotland, or is that just?
I wouldn't put it past them, but I think it looks doomed to failure now, and it'll be yet another waste of public money. So I think the Lord Advocate's coat, if it isn't, it should be on a sugly peg. He seems to have made numerous cock-ups now.
Here's an idea that nobody seems to have stuck up on the headline, the front of an article at the moment. You know how we complain about the fact that the United Kingdom doesn't have a written constitution, and this is a serious problem, especially now. What constitution do we operate? Is it the same in Scotland? I suppose effectively it is.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
We've got the Kirk, we've got the.
We're not talking about an English constitution. We're talking about a British constitution.
Effectively, the Scottish legal system operate under an unwritten constitution because it's a UK constitution. Same with the education system, same with the health system, and same with the Kirks. Well, I need to think about that. Somebody should be investigating that. Somebody with some resources that we don't have.
Okay, let's move on to the depressing one now. Mm-hmm. Nicola Sturgeon was interviewed by Sophie Ridge this morning, which you caught and gave me a heads up on. You're not keen to talk about this, Stuart.
Not really. It's a disaster.
I'm going to force you to.
It was a disaster.
I caught it after it was over, and obviously was looking to see why you gave me the heads up. And right at the beginning, nothing controversial, just talking about COVID. I thought she looked tired and wabbit. to be honest. I didn't think she was her usual sharp self.
That's possibly true.
And then it moved on to Salmond. Um, and I think she's made a major mistake because she has hinted that Alex Salmond wanted her to collude with him in suppressing the investigation.
She also said, I'm not going to comment on it, she also said that she was in it was a dilemma for her because Alex Salmond, outside her family, was her closest friend. Now, that's a fairly devastating thing to
Well,
say.
I mean, it's not the first time she said that. That's not new.
I don't think that's just, maybe it was throwing in the outsider family bit that threw me.
Well, I mean, she worked with him for 30 years, didn't she?
There you go. It's a long time.
So he was his mentor. I mean, if you think about how close you get to the people that influence your career,
I've never worked with anybody for 30 years, so I have no idea.
well, you know, I mean, there's been a couple of people in my life who've helped me and taught me who, and that would be difficult for me, to be honest, not to help them out. It takes a strong personality to put what's right before what feels right, which is to defend and help your friends.
No, I'm not been in the position of having mentors. My father died when I was quite young and various things. I have been in the other role quite often over the years as a mentor for younger people. So I've had the other position, and I understand what the power relationship can be, and I can understand what Me Too is. And I put my hands up. I'm perfectly, I'm going to say I'm perfectly clean, but I do understand the power that is potentially there.
Well, I mean, we had a chat off camera that we've decided we're not going to go down that road.
No, I'm not going down that. Can I just point out that the reason I called you, or put your heads up on what I saw, switched over. I didn't get the very beginning of Nicola's interview with Sophie Ridge, but they were talking away about what things I expected to be talking away. Wasn't really getting stuck in about hospitality. Quite, there's another story weren't going to cover, the way the BBC got tore into the SNP government about hospitality. She wasn't getting tore in like the BBC. Just generally, you could tell that she was probably thinking about comparing what was happening in Scotland, what's about to happen in the north of England. And everything seemed fine to me. And then all of a sudden, when she swapped to asking Alex Salmond, Nicola's demeanor just collapsed. It was like, oh, I don't want to talk about this.
I mean, I wonder if she had a few bevies last night, because it was not the normal Nicola. The camera on her didn't make her look particularly perky either. I don't know. I just felt she was exhausted, and I think she made a couple of mistakes that will come back to haunt her. She's created tomorrow's headlines, and I don't think she meant to do it. I might be wrong about that. She might have decided to get the gloves off. I don't know. But that's for tomorrow's headlines. Interesting UK. Well, it's not UK actually, is it? It's England. The north of England local politicians, it's being muted that they're going to put so much pressure on Richie Sunak. He's going to have to go back to the original form of furlough in order to get away with shutting pubs, etc.
It's interesting, this whole issue. The Tories, of course, don't want to spend money at all. They never do. But they're kind of stuck. It's a huge hypocrisy. They operate what these days is called modern monetary theory. They've got a magic money tree when they want it, but the rest of the time they say we've got to balance our books. Now, it would appear to me that are really up against it, because I saw the leader of Bolton Council, which is one of the bigger boroughs. They don't call them boroughs in that part of the world, but part of Greater Manchester, which compares to London. They've got boroughs in London, I think. Anyway, Bolton is obviously they have. Anyway, it's quite a it's a big place on its own. It was a Conservative leader, and I watched the entire interview with him. And it took me a while to figure out that he was a Tory, because I didn't. I was on the wrong side of the room. I didn't see the little graphic along the bottom of the screen. I was doing something else. It really did take me quite a while. And he was 100% backing the Northern mayors.
Yeah, the Tory party, I think what we have to remember is the Tory party has still got a huge tranche of councillors and members who are basically One Nation Tories. Unfortunately, the tip of the iceberg now is the right wing version of the Tory party, and they're the ones in power.
Mm. That's a good point. I've been to Bolton. This is a good point, Tory. So hang on to what you were about to say. I went to Bolton when I was 19 and stayed with a family, a relative of my girlfriend, as it was, in Bolton. And do you know one of the things that struck me? I couldn't believe there were all these Conservative clubs. I mean, I'm a Scotsman. It might have been my first. It wasn't my first trip to Bolton. It might have been my first trip to England when I think about it. And I just was amazed as a Scotsman and as a Ouija and a Highlander at 50-50. I was thinking, what are they doing with all these Conservative clubs? I heard the north of England was a kind of,
Well, I mean, every town in the borders has got its Conservative club, mate.
And that doesn't count. That doesn't add up to very much. How many towns?
No, but you know what I mean. I mean,
I do know, but how many towns are there on the border?
Yeah, but at one time, every reasonably sized township in Scotland had its liberal club, Conservative club.
No, you're talking
Oh,
posh. I grew up in the Highlands and I grew up in Glasgow.
and you didn't have liberal clubs.
I lived in a naive world. Did I? I don't think so.
And they didn't have liberal clubs in there.
Anyway, I'm simply telling you that what really struck me, I was quite surprised, given that Bolton, well, Luke comes from Bolton. Who's the famous comedian comes from Bolton? But it didn't have a reputation as being a particularly posh place, but there were all these Conservative clubs. And there you go.
Well, as I say, I mean, I think we need to remember that the Tory party that we see on the telly most is not really the Tory party outside London. It's interesting. I didn't realise that Richie Sunak was a Richmond guy, which is a Yorkshire guy.
Yes, but that's the posh end of Yorkshire.
Yes, I know that. But I'm just saying, I hadn't realised. I just presumed
wasn't
it was a London
the
MP.
Baldy guy? Wasn't the previous leader of the Tory party that used to have that?
Ian Duncan Smith.
That's the fella. No, not Ian Duncan Smith. Lord, the one that is now a lord. Oh goodness.
Oh, do you mean they're not all lords?
The young fella that when he first turned up, he was making this speech at a Tory party conference.
Oh God, I've forgotten.
See, you forget these people. The nice fella, he was always a smiling face. But you've got to bear in mind that constituency includes Catterick Camp, which has got a lot of squaddies in it. It's where nearly every squaddie in Britain goes for their first training, isn't it?
Well, do we think that they have the power in the north to do something about the south, the government in the south?
It's a huge issue. I honestly don't know. I am not qualified to really comment on it, apart from the fact that there is a big difference between the north and the south. I don't know the north of England very well at all. I lived in the south 20 years and I understand that. The north, I don't know.
Well, anyway, we'll need to wait and see about that one. And I suppose the last thing we need to talk about is what's behind me.
Nice poll.
The latest poll. Don't read the 56% as support for independence. That's not accurate. It's a 53% support for independence with the don't knows taken out.
Can't you go like that?
But yeah, well, it's the same headline. It's kind of why I did it. So you get the two halves of it.
All right. Okay.
Um,
I saw the headline, and I've got 2 points to make about what I've seen about the poll. I haven't read the. I haven't gone in poured in onto the Excel download that I have downloaded, which has the details. But there were two things that struck me. First of all, I'm sure that I think the summary suggested there were 2,000 people interviewed, and yet when I went to the Survation site, they were talking about 1,000. And again, I'm not going to. Don't. This is not on oath, but I'm pretty sure that the main questions asked were very conditional questions. If there is such, if there's a majority, it's if there's a majority, if there's, they were far too conditional, the questions for me. It's not a reliable poll as far as I can see.
well, Scott Goes Pop is asking for funding for another poll.
I prefer his answers.
To ask the question, should Scotland be an independent country? Because he made the point that a lot of these recent polls, it's been a conditional question rather than a straightforward, should we be independent or not? So if listeners would like to support that poll,
I'll send him a tenner.
if you go to Scott Goes Pop, he's looking for a bit of cash to run it sometime before Christmas. I would suggest he runs it right after the SNP party conference.
Well, there's another issue. There are various motions, there seems to be more, maybe just me, I'm interested now, but there seems to be more response. There's people publishing motions, there's people publishing their manifestos to get on the NEC. There seems to be quite a lot of grassroots activity within the SNP at the moment. Am I right?
I think that the, shall we say, old timers, which is really pre 2015, 14, 15, are really worried about the look of the party now. The debacle with the NEC not allowing Westminster MPs or making it more difficult for them to stand as MSPs has frightened a lot of people into action, I think.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to repeat things I've said over the past. It's going to sum it up this way. The opposition to the SNP is now so poor. If you're a young person looking for a career in many aspects of Scottish public life, regardless of your position on independence, you're going to look at the SNP.
And that's a worry. That I think is what I think's becoming apparent is that people have an agenda, at the top of which is not independence.
Well, there's one person in particular, Rihanna Spear, has said as much. She's a devolutionist. What's she doing on the NEC of the SNP?
Exactly, and I think that the SNP membership are waking up to that. We've been banging on about problems that carpetbaggers bring. And I have to be honest, I didn't expect it to show its face so soon. But I mean, it's difficult. They were a small party that quadrupled its membership in a matter of months, and they wouldn't have the checks and balances needed to protect the core message. Well, they didn't have, because they haven't protected the core message.
And it would appear that the constitutional framework that they've had before the membership expanded has not been modified to suit.
Difficult, because they were a very democratic party.
Well, if we could,
in a lot of ways.
If you drill down into it a bit, there are a certain number of the NEC. My goodness, it's sounding like a Labour Party discussion, isn't it? Uh, 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 Originally, I think the NEC was nearly all voted up from the branches, but seem to be an awful lot of interest groups
Yeah,
have got members on
well,
the NEC now, and they weren't voted in by the members; they were
they
voted in by these affiliated groups.
they expanded that due to the size of the membership, and I think Alan Smith, the European member of Parliament, who's now sitting in Westminster, I seem to remember a tweet from him suggesting that they cut that down, the affiliated membership of the NEC, and that is a problem area.
When was that cut down?
Well, they haven't cut it down, but he's suggesting they should do that.
Right.
I mean, that is an area that will cause problems, because obviously, if you're an affiliate member, that makes you an interest group, and you're going to put forward somebody to promote your interest rather than independence.
This appears to be what's been happening. And also the argument is, I mean, and I can see it because some of these people obviously will have moved in. Well, quite a lot of people who support the SNP and independents have come from left-wing politics. Now, they are well used to.
They know how to play. They know how to play the game.
They know how to play the game to get their own way.
Yeah. And that has been imported into the party. Great having all these ex-Labour voters in the party, but I don't think ever wanted to see what will we call them?
Don't know. Let me just give you a headline I saw read in the Observer today. Apparently, George Orwell and his wife, while they were in Spain fighting for the Republican government against Francoists, were targeted by the official Communist Party of Great Britain Soviet-supported main rebel army. And it was his experience. We know all about Brave New World and Animal Farm. And it was, of course, his experiences, Catalonia really was what led to that.
Well, he certainly didn't come back a supporter of communism, put it that way. A lot of people, for some reason, think George Orwell was a communist. He wasn't.
No, he came back.
They didn't support communism in any way, shape, or form.
There was a split during the Spanish Civil War, according to the Observer, front page of the Observer today, I think. And there was a split. They were actually fighting with each other.
Yeah, they were killing each other.
They were killing each other in Barcelona at the time, 1937. Split between, and George Orwell joined the Independent Labour Party, and they were fighting against the Communist Party,
who were fighting against the anarchists, if I remember rightly. It's a long time since I've done anything on the Spanish Civil War.
Get disillusioned. Sure,
and then they came back to the UK and infected the Labour Party with the same nonsense.
Well, let's not go into the Labour Party anymore. Oh, God,
I do think there are lessons the SNP need to learn very quickly.
Very quickly.
From what's happened in certain areas of Labour policy.
We've got a local AGM in Leith, what, a week on Wednesday or something? We've got the conference on the 28th of November. And we need to find out what's going on then. Anybody in the Leith at the moment, Leith AGM's coming up. Anybody who wants to come on and talk to us about what's happening in Leith, we'd be more than delighted.
Anything else that struck you today?
I think I've just done
it. Brewer. Did you watch Brewer?
Well, we know what we know what the BBC.
Oh, I know what we haven't mentioned that we can't ignore. Margaret Ferrier.
Oh no! All right. She sold her story to the Sun. So
she's not going to resign.
I am on the side of is it Kevin McKenna? I'm sorry. I mean, there have been other people in the SNP, and well, we could just name him Peter Morrell, who's he's been accused of things that
He's
have gone
not an
against.
MP.
No, he's not an MP, but other people have been disciplined rather quickly. Perump. What's the word? Perump? Anyway, rather quickly. And it would appear that Margaret Ferrier has been hung out to dry.
I don't understand. She's obviously annoyed because what she's going to do now will damage the party. And maybe that's the reason, because obviously the party know her better than we do. Maybe that's the reason that it was so clean cut. She should resign from every member of the party that was asked about it, because they knew there's a possibility she wouldn't. I don't know the woman, so I can't say. But it's not going to be a good thing.
Well, if you add in what we've already discussed about the complications inside the SNP and Scottish politics, we don't know if there's a link. It may not that she maybe was dealt with so savagely for other reasons that we don't know about.
Well, you just invented another conspiracy, Stuart. Congratulations. And maybe Boris Johnson is a homosexual.
It's my own fault for years and years supporting
We just
Labour.
can't tell. We just can't tell because we don't know.
We don't know.
Donald Trump is really a Democrat, but we don't know him. So, but it's a possibility. Anyway, I think we'll call it a day at that because we're getting silly now.
Yes, we are.
Thanks.
We haven't got a funny to end with.
Excuse me. Thanks for being on, Stuart. And Jimmy, it's Sunday. You shouldn't have to work on a Sunday. Where are you? And well, thanks for not being on, Jimmy Hutton. And I'm Norrie Stewart. Well, thank you all for watching, listening. And we'll catch you tomorrow, Monday, when Boris Johnson is going to follow Nicola Sturgeon's lead and lock down the North.
Well, according to what I've heard, that he went off duty on Thursday tea time, so he must be having a big weekend. So he could be a bit hungover.
Well, have any of them been seen?
Oh, there's one or two always posted up there. Jenwick. I don't think Hancock's been seen for the week over the weekend.
Well,
did you hear about Hancock getting accused of drinking in the bar after 10 o'clock at night at Westminster, after telling everybody else that the bars were to shut at 10? You would believe that, wouldn't you? Of course you would.
But that's different. That's different.
He's part of the elite.
It's not like you and I, who have had years of 10 o'clock closing. What are these youngsters moaning about?
So suddenly I've got a vision of the Plough in Keith, and at 9:30 in the days of 10 o'clock closing, they always used to serve cold mince sandwiches. They were delicious. It sounds horrible, but they were delicious. So we would always get in there at 9:30 for last orders.
And a cold mince sarnie.
And then at that point, at checking out time at 10 o'clock, we'd go down the road and into the Royal Hotel, which had always had residents, which meant you could sit there in the cocktail bar at 3 in the morning.
Aye.
There's always a way around.
We should bring back the old opening time. See how they like 11 o'clock till 2:30, and then 5 o'clock till 10 o'clock. See how they like them times.
Those were the days.
When men were men and had to drink 10 pints in 2 hours.
At least the beer was cheap then.
I was talking to my grandson about that.
You know that beer was cheaper than Coca-Cola. It was, beer was cheaper than Coca-Cola.
Well, I explained to him that you could get 8 pints for £1. And he said, well, that's not possible. I went, yeah, 2 and 6 a pint. And he went, what's 2 and 6? And I had to think it's 12 and a half pence.
All right. There you go. Well, when I was young, I remember I made this rational decision when I turned about 17 or 18. And one of my excuses to my aunts, who I always lied to about my drinking at that age, was that, well, a bottle of Coca-Cola cost £1, which was that 5p?
Yeah.
But a half pint of beer only cost 9p or 9d, which is less than
Yeah.
a shilling. So you got a
Yeah.
half a pint of Coke or half a pint of beer, and the beer was cheaper. That was my excuse. That's what I used to tell. I used to lie to my aunts.
Because it was a thirst thing, not an alcohol thing.
Absolutely, and I loved the taste, but preferred the taste of Coca-Cola.
We always do this. We always say bye and then something else comes up. Okay.
Cheerio.
Cheerio, folks. Thanks for watching and listening. Cheers for now. Got